you for inviting me today. Clemson reminded me. Do you know what the N in Clemson stands for? Knowledge. No. Which I could go on. The O in Clemson stands for honor. And the C in Clemson stands for sensitivity. Okay, first of all, I see Nina sitting here and as a guest. Nina was the first one. I opened my emails before I left the house, and Nina had already tried to link in with me. I guess you saw that I accepted. So I want to point out to you that that was probably a smart thing on her part. She was aware of what she needed to do, and so I do a good bit of lecturing in the healthcare sector. I do 2 or 3 dozen speeches a year, and when I talk to the MHA programs, Masters in Health Administration, I always tell them that you need to be linked in. By the time I get back to the hotel or wherever I am, I'll have 15 and 20 requests to get linked in. Just a little bit more about the background. When I open my mouth, I am from somewhere in the South, Washington, Georgia, which is halfway between Athens and Augusta. And then I left there to go to Georgia Tech and got my degree there, my undergraduate, and then I worked my way through school. So they created a job for me in the physical plant when I got out, and I worked there for the next 3 years, going to school at night at Georgia State, and I got a master's degree in professional accountancy. And so when I got that degree, I went to work for Price Waterhouse on the audit staff. We were talking this morning about the definition of an auditor is a person that comes along after the battle is over and bayonets the wounded. And it was not my cup of tea. So the day the State Board of Accountancy approved my application to be a CPA, I turned in my resignation, went to work for one of the Price Waterhouse clients as CFO. Fast forwarding, I was CFO for another company, and then in 1978, a friend of mine I'd met in one of the companies had gotten into physician recruiting. They were getting opportunities to do executive search, and they called me up and recruited me. So I went over there in May of '78 as one person doing executive search in a small firm. And then in September of '78, the owner came in and wanted to sell out. So essentially, I was working, the other fellows who was working there was a guy named Rick Jackson. And Rick had recruited me into executive search. And so we found ourselves in 1978. He was running physician recruiting, I was running executive search. And then we bought the companies, we split, followed it, went our separate ways on an amicable basis, kept in touch. In December of 2013, we ended up becoming an owned company of Jackson Healthcare, which is basically a conglomerate of a holding company for independently managed organizations. We have 17 different companies, and Jackson Healthcare is located in Alpharetta on Haynes Bridge. It's the 3rd largest staffing company in healthcare. So all of our companies are doing healthcare work, whatever they're doing. Tyler & Company is a retained search firm. And I ran that, had a succession plan. So when I sold it, I transitioned out, and now I have a bunch of different jobs. I'm supposed to be retired. And what happened is, when you get into our business, the letting go of contacts is pretty difficult because people still call you up and want you to do this, that, and the other. So I have my first job, which is getting to be lesser and lesser, is I do ambassadorial work and speaking for Tyler & Company. And then my second job is, about 10 years ago, I wrote a book on governance in healthcare, and I've started doing governance work with primarily hospital boards. So over the last 10 years, I've ended up doing enough so that my bio on the governance side is about 3 pages long, single-spaced. Wrote that book. I have 2 books that were out. And then the third job, I don't know why I did this, but I did it. Our professional society is the American College of Healthcare Executives, and I've been involved with them since, maybe my 3rd year or 4th year in the business. And so the Georgia chapter of that organization is the 3rd largest chapter in the country because we encompass the entire state. And so I ran for office, and I got elected regent for the college. So I'm doing that, and that can be a full-time job if you're not careful. In fact, when I leave here, I go over to a lunch and a planning meeting for that. By virtue of being the regent, I ended up on the board. So, and then the fourth job I have is with Jackson Healthcare. They have me working with various presidents of the organizations where they're trying to do something in the C-suite or be with the C-suite of the healthcare organizations, primarily nonprofit hospitals. So that's a little bit about my background. What I'm doing today is I'm going to give you some inside knowledge about executive search firms and how they work, and try to leave enough time so we can have some questions at the end. Some of you will probably have some good stories about having dealt with headhunters and how they treated you. So I'm gonna do that, and
there is some PDF document you emailed. Unfortunately, we could not make copies
yep.
of it, but I'll email it to everybody present.
Yeah, you're going to email them the slides too, right? Okay, good, good. Yeah, you got two things. You'll have the slides from this presentation. You'll also have the Bill of Rights of the Association of Executive Search Consultants, and that's our professional association in the executive search world, and they promulgate the standards of ethics for executive search firms. Okay, all right. So here we go. I started out, of course, being a CPA. I started out doing finance searches back in the 70s and 80s. Healthcare was growing, primarily the for-profits. We ended up with Charter Medical in Macon, and then a company called American Medical International that was a fast-growing chain. They were based out of Beverly Hills, California. And, but we ended up working with the Southeast and Midwest, and then eventually the California regions. I think one 6-month period with AMI, I did 22 searches. So that's a lot of searches to have with one client. I ended up specializing in CEO searches. And I don't know why that happened, but I did my first CEO search 2 years into it, and we did the CEO over at Peachford Hospital, which at that point was Charter's flagship hospital in the psychiatric area. All right. So this is give you some kind of feel for the industry. It's hard to get numbers about the industry because you have some publicly traded companies like Korn Ferry and Heidrick & Struggles. There was one called CT Partners. They went bust in the last couple of weeks, couple of months. And so, but these are the estimates. There's two types of groups. There's the retained search people, and their names mean exactly that. They're retained. And then the other group is contingency, and that means that their fee is contingent upon placing somebody. And so they work two different ways. It looks the same. Somebody gets hired, but the way they work is entirely different. Okay. The contingency, you get the fee is contingent upon a hire. You'll end up with a non-exclusive agreement generally, which means that they might be a client might be working with 3 or 4 different contingency firms at the same time. They're all sending in resumes, and then primarily middle management. You can occasionally see contingency firms doing a high-level search. It's usually accidental. Okay, and I would say, probably the cutoff is around, when you go from contingency to retainer, it's usually 175, 200 as far as the compensation ranges. And when we talk about compensation, we talk about as salary plus bonus. And then, but one of the nice things about contingency firms, they will market you like mad. So if you're between jobs, that's probably an okay thing to do. If you're in a job and you're just wanting to look selectively because you don't want your employer to know it, you might not want to be working on the contingency side. Okay. Usually there's no personal interview. They might interview you on the phone, but they won't interview you face to face. Little reference checking, not much follow-up, and minimal information on the employer. Resumes sent all over the internet. Competition between firms may place you in the middle. This is one of the problems you have in the contingency business, is sometimes you get 2 firms sending your resume to the same person. And the net result is that sometimes the firms get into a spitting contest back and forth about who's going to get the fee. So that's one of the downsides of it. Okay? All right, now on the retained, these are some of your management recruiters, and Robert Half are two names that come to mind. I don't keep, Bell Oaks is one that's here in the city, and some of you may have worked with them. Now, on the retained side, the fee is paid by, this fee is always paid by the client, but it's paid during the course of the search. Typically, we bill a third, a third, a third. And so usually, right nowadays, most of people the fee is somewhere between 27 to 33% of the first year's comp, okay? So you bill a retainer, then you bill another one at 60 days, another one at 120, or some combination of that. So one of the things about that, when a client is paying that fee, you know they're serious about hiring, okay? So it's very, very rare that you get somebody, occasionally you do. Sometimes you get situations where they have no intention of hiring, but they're paying you the fee anyhow. And if we have time, I'll tell you how that comes about. Exclusive assignment, references are checked. Yes, you will have references checked at some point during the course of the assignment, and it will not be just references that you gave to the recruiter. You'll get backdoor references too, and that's references that you did not give. They're gonna check you out pretty well. Other things that go on, for example, at Tyler & Company, we do a credit criminal, before we even send anybody in, we do a credit criminal driving check, we look for litigation, we verify all the degrees. If somebody has a license of some type and they put it on their resume, we look for that and we go verify that. If they are a fellow in American College of Healthcare Executives, we verify that. And it's sort of like the expectation you would have if you're going to pay somebody all this money up front. Let's make sure that you're vetting the candidates so that you, oh, by the way, the social media, we do all of that. And that's really important if you're in transition, to make sure you've gone back and looked at your name and what comes up, and make sure that you've got, in fact, I wrote an article called Digging in the Digital Dirt for the American College of Healthcare Executives about the things that come up. Because every time you walk in, somebody has already Googled you. That's the first place you got to do, is make sure that whatever is out there is not coming up negative for you, okay? And then you should get a lot of information about the employer. I mean, not just the job description, but what the personalities are like, what the people like, what the culture is like, things like that. Because the search people should, because they're guaranteed their fee, they should be doing a very thorough job and should be really working well with you to make sure that they're making a good match. Because that's one of the important things. If you don't make a good match, you don't get to do the work again, okay? Or you get to exercise your guarantee and do it for free if it doesn't work out. All right, these are some retained firms in my industry. Tyler & Company, Witt Kiefer, Korn Ferry, Heidrick & Struggle, Spencer Stewart. We are generally up against all of those, especially if you're doing a CEO search. And basically what they do is they ask for RFPs, we send it in, then the next thing you know that you've been asked to come and do an interview, and usually they have 2 or 3 firms. We got a CEO search coming up here in Atlanta, and they're interviewing 5 firms, and I think every one of us is on that list. So that's what happens. All right. We believe in, we're part of the Association of Executive Search Consultants, and it would be good if you're in transition, or even if you are hiring, to see whether the firm you're dealing with is a member of AESC. And I say that from this standpoint. There are good firms that are not members of AESC. So the question I always ask is, whose code of ethics do you follow? I'm a member of about 6 professional associations. I have to follow them all. But if they're not following the AESC code of ethics, then you've got a question of, okay, where do you go if they do something unethical and things like this? So it wouldn't be a knockout, but I'd want to hear what they have to say about why they're not a member of the AESC. 2 things to remember in dealing with retained search firms. One of them is parallel processing. And that means that you can't be in 2 assignments at the same time. Now, from a candidate perspective, this is a bit irritating. But from a client relationship expectation, if you think about it, if they're representing two different companies and you're a candidate on it, they're really not representing those companies, they're representing you. So what happens is, if you get in one process, you have to see it to the end. And unless you want to drop out of the process, then you can go into a different process. But if you don't drop out and you stay through it, it could go on and on and on, you still not get hired. From a candidate perspective, this is an irritation, but that's sort of the way it is, okay? That's the first thing. Second thing is the off limits. And off limits means that, you know, if you think about it, you've got the opportunity as a search consultant to walk up and down the halls, find out who's good, find out who's not good, and then if you find somebody that's really good and you place them somewhere, you sort of start making your own business. So generally what happens is that the client is off limits for a year, and you have to define off limits by virtue of the business unit. I mean, is it just, if you're at Coca-Cola, okay? And are you going to define everything in Coca-Cola's off limits? No, not unless you got a whole lot of work coming out of Coca-Cola. So what you might, if you were doing work in the finance department, you might define corporate finance as your off limits. And that's the first thing, is what's the definition of the business unit. And the second one is how much time, okay? Is it for a year, for 2 years, or whatever? One of our clients is in Pittsburgh, and UPMC, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, they're in the news all the time up in Pennsylvania because they're huge. So what they did with us is that we do work for them, so therefore all of their units, and I think they're like 9 hospitals, they're off limits for a year from any time we do a search for them. So those are the type of things that you get into, the definition of the off limits. All right. So those two things. And before I go on, any questions about that?
How many times have you placed somebody in a company and then placed that same person in another company once you get beyond your off limit?
Yes, good question. Okay, so here's what happens. You can place them, first of all, if they're spitting out, okay, for whatever reason, so even regards to that. But the second thing is you can place them if you get permission from their employer, okay, so you'd pick up the phone call. That's still not the answer to your question. All right, I have 2 candidates in 37 years, 2 candidates that I've placed 3 times, okay, 3 times. So I've got maybe a dozen that we've placed twice. So then everybody after that, and you know, we do 100 so searches a year. So just figure out in 37 years. That's not a lot. And what happens is that if you're doing it right as a search consultant, you're getting a whole, and I'm going to show you these statistics in a minute, you're getting a whole new batch of people in all the time that you didn't even know about. So if you're trying to make a match, okay, and then the odds go down that you're going to end up placing somebody. And one of the things that we do on the ethical side is that we make sure that our clients know our relationship with the candidate, because we don't want it to come up and bite us later on, okay? I did the CEO search in Macon, I guess it was 2 years ago, for the Medical Center of Central Georgia. It is the 2nd largest hospital in Georgia. Did you know that? Behind Grady, okay? So we put the person that ended up getting the assignment as Ninfa Saunders. She is absolutely outstanding, outstanding. And we had to go through, we went through she was one of those 2 people we've placed 3 times. And each one was just a different circumstance, you know, where she was and what was happening and everything like that. So it's not very often, okay? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How does an executive search firm, an ethical executive search firm, deal with parallel processing that issue? If they have a candidate that's, let's say, in the process,
yeah,
they've already been presented to the client,
yeah,
and then that same firm gets a different search,
yeah,
the position says, oh my goodness, the second position is really perfect for that person, whereas... I'll
tell you how you deal with it. You know, they say sunshine is the best antiseptic. So you go back to your clients. And I'll tell you what happened. We had an instance similar, but not quite the same. So we were doing 2 HR searches at the same time. One of them up in Virginia and one of them down in Savannah, okay? And so the one in Virginia had gotten all screwy. We'd presented this candidate on it, and we thought it was not going to close, it was going to go away, blah, blah, blah. And in the meantime, for some reason, one of our research associates, one of our old-time research associates who knew better, okay, managed to contact the same candidate, and we ended up having them on 2 searches, and it was just stupid on our part. But it was, it was just people being people. What happens with us is once you become a client, and everybody in Tyler Base is connected with Org Base. So you look them up in Tyler Base, and they'll have a little circle with a line through it. That means they're off limits. So you have to go through your protocols. For some reason, somebody had not connected up the 2. So when they went to this person didn't have a name. So we sat there and said, oh crap, how did we get into this, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, the best thing to do is let me call the client. You know what the client said? Fine, it doesn't matter to me. They didn't care, which is something else. Now we cared more because we knew what was supposed to happen, but they didn't care. So what should happen is if you do have a screw up like that, you got to let both clients know what's going on. And, actually the other client in Virginia was a little bit hacked about it. But, the one in Savannah, it was no big deal for them. And the candidate ended up going to Virginia. So, other questions? All right. Has anybody ever run across a parallel processing issue or a off limits? I'm seeing some nods back there. Okay. All right. All right, let's see. This is Blue Steps. I'll give you, if you're in general business, healthcare too. ASC has a program where you put your information on file. We go to that. Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm sorry. Can I go back to the parallel processing?
Yes, sir.
I would imagine at some point you presented a candidate, and if the process gets elongated, a given candidate might be not in the running.
Yeah.
Then you can pull them out of that search.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. As soon as the client says, I don't think we're going to go this direction, you pull them out and put them in something else if they're good.
You have clients that say, I'm not sure yet. Leave it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
an extended period of time. And
Yeah.
What obligation do you have to that? Not your employer client, but the client that's looking for a job.
Yeah.
He's been in this mix in a secondary role for 2 months. Let's do something new.
Yeah, one of the things we put in our contract is if they hadn't moved on them in 30 days, we can put them into another search. But we would always go back to the client and say, look, this thing's been going on. You're not going to go this direction. We got another one that looks really good. What do you want us to do? We encourage you to let the candidate go because the candidate wants to make a move. Again, most of the time, people are reasonable. Okay. Every once in a while, you end up with a jerk of a client. And, you're into that. You've got an obligation to them and everything like that. You try to serve them as best you can. But most people are reasonable if you explain the circumstances. Okay? All right. This was a Tyler & Company statistic, just to sort of let you know. And this is us. We don't know whether we're the same as Korn Ferry or not, but, this is where we are. 30% of the candidates come from the files. So it is really good to have your resume on file with the organization. Okay? So the second thing is, if it's on file, get somebody to put some comments in there in your file. And I think most of the databases, they'll have that. Those that are publicly traded, they're really, we got stuff in there like this person's a jerk, and stuff like that. I don't know whether Korn Ferry does that because they're publicly traded and they're big and they got big pockets and you can sue them and stuff like that. So I imagine that their files are more sanitized than the ones at Tyler & Company. But anyhow, a new parent thinks that because they have deep pockets, so we have to be more careful now than we used to be because, I would always, I've never been threatened with a suit, period. We've never been sued or anything like that by a client or a candidate or anything like that. I always told them, though, if it ever came up, said, look, go ahead, I'm judgment proof. I don't have any money. Yes, ma'am.
Do board search candidates go in there too?
The answer is, in our business, we don't do board searches because most of the clients are predominantly nonprofits, okay? Now, in the publicly traded firms, Korn Ferry, all the big firms, yes, have a board database, okay? It would be whatever their database is, and you'd be coded as a board member. And those searches are handled usually by a very specialized group within the firm, okay? So in ours, when they start paying the board members more, or not, then most of your boards now for hospitals don't get paid at all, okay? Only your big system boards are getting paid, and one of my clients is a big system, and they pay $15,000 a year, okay? They're going to eventually be paying more than that, and they're eventually going to be using a lot of search firms to find board members. It's just the nature of the beast because they've expanded their multi-states now. Yes, sir?
How has the influx of LinkedIn as a tool for recruiters changed this for
It's changed it for the better to a great extent. So if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you're making a big mistake. So our researchers used an advanced form of LinkedIn, okay? And we encourage everybody. In fact, I've got a slide in this presentation just about LinkedIn. And I'm gonna talk, if I have time at the end, I'm gonna just talk about the challenges of executive search nowadays, okay? But everybody has to have a LinkedIn profile. There's just no question about it, okay? All right. Well, let me just say here. So if you look at this, I mean, the numbers just get narrow real fast, okay? So it's where, therefore, one of the things you need to do is make sure that you're in a lot of different searches with a lot of different firms. You can't be in 2 searches with the same firm, but if you got a lot of contacts in the other firms, you can be in multiple searches going on at the same time.
You made a comment about getting comments on whatever's in the file. How do you get the comments on whatever's?
Well, for example, okay, I go to a meeting, primarily healthcare executives. All right, I'll be at one this afternoon, okay? And somebody, I know one of the people that's going to be there has expressed an interest in changing jobs. So I'll go back to my computer, I'll pull up that person, and then there's a comment section. And I say, this is a good person, met him, we should look at him if he has done something. Conversely, I go to a cocktail party and this person's drunk, okay? Blah, blah, blah. This person loves to party, okay? So that goes into the database. And most of the time, you as a candidate don't even know what's in there, okay? And most of the time, when it goes in there, it's not rumor. It's something that we observed ourselves, okay? So every once in a while, and we tend to put things in there that are very positive as opposed to things that are very negative. That said, every once in a while, we have a candidate that we know something really, really bad about, and they become a personal off limits, which is it's like, what was it, in Animal House? Yeah, no, it was triple.
Double secret probation.
Double secret probation. That's what it was. Okay. They're on double secret probation. All right. All right.
Is that someone who's record that you knew that?
Yeah. So if we had a record, I would say this guy's following me. He knows what to do. Okay. I'm more probably inclined to put something in Nina's record. But she's not in Tyler Base yet. She's just on LinkedIn because she linked up with me first. All right. So how? Yes, sir.
So Larry, to Doug's question, how would we as candidates find out what's in
You don't know. You probably won't ever know unless somebody tells you. Now, I'll give you an example. I had a friend call me, and he said, Larry, he says, I'm not getting presented on any of the searches. And I said, and he says, is there something in my file that's keeping me from doing that? So I looked in the file, and I said, no, there's nothing in here. And so I sent out an email to the researchers, which is our first line. I mean, they are our backbone. And I said, okay, does anybody know anything about this candidate? And it sent back, the logical answer came back, said, Larry, these people like him are a dime a dozen, and so what's happening is he's getting eliminated because there are too few jobs and too many really good candidates. So I just passed that word on to him. That seems to satisfy him. Okay? Yes, ma'am?
Larry, I know how clients come to you, but how do the candidates
approach you?
Okay. How do the candidates approach us? Okay. And so I'm going to deal with that in these slides, actually. Okay.
If we let you do that.
Huh?
If we let you do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, that's okay. You know, I like interchange here. First thing, if you do good work, you know, people find out about you and they pass your name on and, you know, and stuff like that. Okay. So that's a good thing. You got a good reputation in whatever industry you're in. Second one is handle job dismissal wisely. And what we mean by that is that you never denigrate your former employer. Never do that, okay? And just take it as objectively as you can, because number one, nobody wants to hear we like to hear all the dirt, but it doesn't enhance you when we hear all the dirt. Okay, there's a part of human nature that likes to hear all the crap that went on and how they goofed you up and pushed you down and everything like that. But if you're not careful, you get into that mode, and next thing you know, you want to be, as the Bible says, lighting a candle as opposed to cursing the darkness. Okay, the other side of that coin is sometimes your denigrating of your employer gets back to your employer. And you need to have a situation where that employer is saying good things about you and not has a tendency to say bad things just because they heard you were saying bad things about them on the street. Maintain up-to-date substantive resume on file. Okay. I have, in general, I have this, what's the word? Angst that most of you try to have resumes. You go in, you interview with somebody, they give you a suggestion on your resume, next thing you do is you change it, okay? So when I teach resume preparation, I say the best thing you can do is get your resume up to where if it got graded, it was a C, okay? So guess what when I took the CPA exam, guess what score you had to have be a CPA? 75. That's exactly right. What do you call the person who graduated last in their medical school? Folks, there's my answer right there. So just get your resume up to a C and then move on, okay? Because the resume does not get you a job. What gets you a job is the networking and also the interview. So if you're going to do anything, put your time into interviewing and developing your interviewing skills, okay? So anyhow, if you got a resume on file and you send it in every couple of years, you're fine, all right? Now, this one is, have interviewed prior and done well. Have interviewed on a prior search and done well. If you did well, but you didn't get it, there's a chance that you're going to be slotted in higher in the order of things, okay? Because you had all of your references checked. You went through the credit, criminal, driving, all that stuff. You interviewed with the client. They liked you. They just chose somebody else. There's a chance you're going to go into another search at a higher level. Okay? You don't have to go through be the 141 that we originally looked at. You'd be one of those almost automatically. Be flexible and professional interest. I was telling somebody who was I talking about it was you. We were talking about moving, and Kurt said he's been all over the world, and I asked him, I said, well, are you trying to stay in Atlanta? And he said no, doesn't matter to him. What a wonderful thing, because I get too many people coming in to see me, and the first thing, between jobs, they got a year's severance, and and the first thing out of their mouth is, I'm gonna look for the first 6 months, I'm gonna look in Atlanta. And I say to them, that's a bad idea, okay? What you need to do is to define an area that you want to, like Southeast. Let me tell you my definition of Southeast. It starts in Maryland, goes Midwest to Missouri, and goes all the way to the outskirts of Texas. And that's a reasonable area to be looking for a job in healthcare, okay? And so I have people come in. I was telling Kurt, I had a friend of mine came in. He spit out of one of the hospitals here, came to see me. His wife wanted to stay in Atlanta, and he was going to look in Atlanta. I said, no. You got to look past that. He said, I'm going to take the first 6 months. No, don't do that. You got to look now. So what did he do? He didn't take my advice. And now, what he's doing, he's commuting back and forth, and he's in Gary, Indiana during the week, and in Atlanta on the weekends, And he loves his job, he says. But, he should have gone back to the spouse and said, look, Larry Tyler, and this is what I tell him. I said, go back to your spouse and say, look, Larry Tyler is emphatic that we're going to have to move. And, put it on me, but you get the conversation started so that you may have to relocate, okay? A lot of people come out and they want to stay in Atlanta. They like Atlanta for whatever reason. I guess they love traffic. But anyhow, they'd be a good source. So my wife was, it's a long story. She ended up she was a partner at King & Spalding, was going to go over to Austin Bird. She had the Olympics as one of her clients. So she goes to tell Billy Payne. Billy Payne says, you got to do that. You're going to come work for us. So she worked her 2 years for ACOP, which was the joint venture between USOC and the Atlantic Committee. So at the end of at the end of a year after the games, you turn out the lights. I mean, it has to be gone. Okay, that's their rules. She turned out the lights and she starts looking for a job. And I said, well, why don't you call some of the headhunters? And she says, I don't know any. And she's married to a headhunter, you understand? I said, why don't you know them? She says, I never return their calls. Well, that's crazy, and I told her that. I mean, she ended up with a good job at Scientific Atlanta, but, it was one of those things where all she had to do was just to return the call, give them some information, take their name and phone number and drop it into the career file. But she didn't do that. And that's what you need to do when you get a new job, or whether you got a job now, whatever. You want to make sure you keep up with the headhunters and their phone numbers, and so you can call them when make a note of when who you told them, to call, stuff like that. What happens is pretty soon you get a lot of calls. They see you as a person with information, and they will be able to help you. So, all right. Be willing to move. We talked about that one. Let me go back. Have a background that fits the specs. This is the most common problem. Most specs on a search, let me tell you, when you're doing a search, what are you doing first? You're looking at their background. And the idea being that your success is, if you've done something like this once before or twice before, you probably do it again. Okay? So we recruit based on the specs. That would be your experience, your education, and everything. But then an organization will hire based on behavioral characteristics or behavioral competencies. Okay? So what you need to do is to make sure you fit the specs. And you don't have to fit every one of them. You have to fit about 80%. Okay? So if you've done, for example, if I'm doing a CFO for, let's say, $1 billion organization, okay? So if you've been the CFO for a $500 million organization, that's about as low as I'm going to go, all right? If you've been the controller for a $1 billion or $2 billion organization, I look at you for the CFO for a $1 billion organization. So that's how the specs get, squared away. And then the question is going to be, do you fit the kind of personality of this organization? Be a participant and leader in associations and societies. Yes, sir.
All right, question. You go the other way. If you are in charge of, let's say, $1 billion or $2 billion organization, and this position is for, say, a $200 million company, will you be willing to look at somebody that's considered maybe too big?
The answer to that is yes. There are three things that people make decisions about when they're changing jobs: money, opportunity, and location. Okay? And so opportunity for senior people, you're going to love this. You heard it from Larry Tyler. For senior people, location trumps everything. Okay? And why is that? Because they're looking at several things. They were looking about getting, they've been on the West Coast. They're from Athens. They want to get back closer. They got the wife or spouse has family someplace. They need to get there. Typically, we're having to deal with aging parents. Okay. Third one is you got people that have children, grandchildren in an area. All right, so that's what happens. So yes, we'll look at them, but we got to make sure that we understand why. And if it's location, that's better. If they're saying opportunity, we're thinking, okay. If they're saying money, they're usually going to take a huge decrease. Now, we had one candidate we placed over at Emory, and Emory's been a client of ours, I don't know, probably 30 years, something like that. Waxes and wanes, but right now we're on a roll with them. And the candidate moved from Wisconsin, took a pay decrease to come to Atlanta because of the spouse. Okay, the spouse was grossly and you know what the saying is: if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. And so that's what happens. So that'll happen to you. It doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, if you're making a move, you want to get a 15 to 20% increase in salary. Okay, and the reason you do even have an increase in salary is because of the risk that you're taking on. It's a risk thing. Okay, all right. Be a participant in association societies. That's been one of the keys to my success, as mediocre as it's been. But I've been in a whole bunch of societies. I'm now in the governing structure of the American College of Healthcare Executives. I've been on this board and that board and do a lot of speaking. All right, wide network of contacts, get good national, regional press. Yes, writing a blog will help you. It'll help people find you. Got to be careful if you're writing a blog, because you may do something, you may say something in that's going to be offensive. And you never know whether it's offensive. You may, and I could tell some jokes, and next thing you know, somebody's come up and said, well, I didn't like that joke because, you offended me on this. Connect on LinkedIn, and that's, again, that's the newest thing. And here's some LinkedIn tips in case you haven't done that. It is absolutely where a lot of people are going. We use it as an adjunct. We have 3 databases at Tyler & Company. LinkedIn's one of them that we use. Tyler Base is one of them that we use. And then there's another one that has all of the hospital positions, and they've got 10 people here in Atlanta. And that's all they do is they call up and make sure that they've got that up to date. So these are the kind of things that you do. Connect, connect, connect. You can join search firm groups on LinkedIn. Y'all knew that, right? All right. Are y'all teaching LinkedIn in this group?
These are our power users.
Power users. Oh, good. I'm preaching to the choir then. Okay. Be recommended by the client. So you get into a situation and the client knows who they want to hire. But for whatever reason, either political or the way they do things, they need to convince others in the organization this person needs to be hired. So they give you the name. So make sure that this person's included in it. It may also be that they're a friend, okay? And if they don't want to hire them, okay? But they need somebody else to do the dirty work for them, if there is dirty work. Yeah. So what happens is if the client says, take a look at this person, then that's great, okay? So does it help to know? Yes, sir.
So if you're in a search and you've been recommended by the client, how does that change or affect you as a candidate?
It doesn't, as you as a candidate, it gives you a plus next to your name.
Right, but I mean in terms of the way that you would present yourself or the way that you would interview? Or...
It shouldn't change at all, okay? Because you have not been named to the post, okay? And if you get too confident, all right, it'll probably work against you. And, and when you're, a pure search guy is going to give an opinion and a recommendation, because don't forget, they're going to guarantee your performance for at least a year. With CEOs, we guarantee it for 3 years. So if it, yeah, I know, it's a long time. And yes, I have had to redo searches where a guy would go for 2 years and 6 months and then get changed out. So, all right. So therefore, be recommended by a client. So you find, one of your clients calls up and said, I got a buddy I've been working with. He is really, really good. He found out about this search that you guys are doing. Can you take a look at it? Well, clients for executive search firms, or for any professional service firm, and they're gods for us, okay? This is where we get our business from. So I'm going to make sure that that person gets looked at. Whether we recommend them or not is a different story, but we're going to make sure that person gets looked at, and by the way, that person's going to get a personal call from me first, okay? So that's how it works. Be recommended by someone the search consultant trusts. We have what we call in the business centers of influence. I've got a bunch of, my friend, one of my good friends is the head of the program in health administration, University of Colorado, Errol Biggs. Errol thinks he's a search guy because he'll give me a name. He says, I don't do anything really. I just call him up, he gives me a name, and then I call him and get money out of it. But that's not the way it works, but that's what happens. We have people. So what happens now is, like people in my position as regent for ACHE, we get calls all the time from either headhunters or something like that. My competition's probably not going to call me for names. If I were not a headhunter, they'd be calling me for names. Okay? All right, and then...
Although we are power users of LinkedIn, we want to hear your thoughts as a recruiter, what you look in LinkedIn, what is the best practice? If you want to go back one slide.
Back one slide? Okay. Google articles, employment, education, post, if you're going to blog. This actually came from one of our top-notch research associates. I am not a power user of LinkedIn, okay? And, but I am going to be at some point.
But especially for somebody who is searching for multiple positions as a treasurer as well as CFO.
Here's what happens. Typically, a researcher who would be doing this would not have two identical positions at the same time. We're trying to...
If I'm a candidate who wants treasurer job or CFO job,
all right.
how do I...
Well, you got to have all your information in there about, because we're reaching out to you. You're not reaching out to us through LinkedIn. Yeah, okay? Yeah. And so what happens is, in fact, I've had several people. My general rule on LinkedIn is that I don't link in with anybody unless they have a healthcare background, because generally I can't place them unless they got a healthcare background. Then occasionally I'll do something with, what was the question?
Why is that?
I'll tell you why it is, because it's a good question, okay? What happens is this: when somebody comes to us and pays us this outrageous fee to do this work, it's not something that they think they can do themselves, or if they can do it themselves, it's going to take too long. It's just got all kinds of issues, okay? So you remember the first thing we said was we go after the specs, okay? If the client says they want to look at people outside of healthcare, okay, then we can look at people outside of healthcare. But if they write the specs such that the person has to have done a healthcare job over the last 5 years, then that's what we're bound to. Okay, they are the ones that are making that decision, not us. So what happens then is, in healthcare, where will they look? Will they look at people outside of healthcare? Yes, in certain positions. For example, they'll look at marketing people. Right now in healthcare, we've got a big press on retail. They might look at a retail person. They've got human resources, common place where you might look at people from outside and they can make that transition. But generally, you know, they're going to look for somebody that's already done it successfully in a similar type institution, only smaller maybe. Okay? So when you're talking about you don't get past the search guy and you're trying to get into healthcare and they won't look at you, that's why. It's not because they don't like you. It's not because that they think that you're in a stupid industry or anything like that. It's because we get held to this standard that we've got to make sure that we're following, otherwise we don't get any more business. Yes, sir. Yes.
So, Larry, you've been in the healthcare industry for a long time.
Yeah.
Can you shed some light over why they're so exclusive? I mean, that's
Well, yeah.
it seems limiting in their whole industry to do things.
It is, and I think that the boards sometimes think about that too. I always put it back on the docs. There's no other, there's no other industry as complicated as healthcare is. And if the docs are not enamored, I mean, they want you to talk their business, and they are really smart people. And so the only time I see us reaching outside of healthcare is if somebody has been on the board. And I'll give you an example. Sid Kirshner he was chairman of the board of Northside. And then when the CEO stepped down, he became the CEO at Northside. Did y'all know that? I mean, he's been in the business now, I don't know, probably 25 years. But he became CEO of Northside. He left that, moved up, went over to the Davis Academy over there near me on Spalding and became the headmaster there. Then he went down to Piedmont and he runs the Piedmont Clinic. Okay? He's 80-something years old. All right, so in fact, when he was the CEO at Northside, we had the same situation happen right across the road, Peachtree Dunwoody, at St. Joseph. And the person who was he was vice chair of Georgia Pacific, became CEO at St. Joseph, came right off the board. Okay? But that's what it is. And, you know, again, it is in many ways an industry that's very backward. And we in healthcare have a hard time doing innovative things. Well, first of all, we're governed by we have, you know, 60% of the revenue comes from the government of some type, either state or federal, mostly feds. So you got, you know, things there you have to watch after. So it is a very complicated field. Drucker was the one, I think, not Drucker, yeah, it may have been Drucker. So it was the most complicated field he'd ever seen. Yes, sir. Alan.
Larry, how often do you look at Facebook, or do you look at Facebook?
Don't look at Facebook at all. And in fact, only reason I'm on Facebook, and you saw the same picture. The picture I had up here, that's my picture on Facebook. Okay? I mean, I got on a suit and a tie and everything like that. I don't look at Facebook at all. We look at it to see if you've done something stupid. Okay? Like, you know, you're sitting there, you're laid out in the sand and you know, stuff like that. We got one colleague who works for us. He's not on our payroll, but he works for us all the time. And he's got this crazy Facebook picture, and he's dressed up like a pirate. And you know, it's just, I mean, he's got an eye patch and everything. And so, okay, so that's Facebook. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
I've actually been in healthcare my whole career.
All right.
So one of the things that I, you know, what you're saying is very true is, you know, we keep changing the nomenclature of what we want to call people.
Yeah.
I don't know why we've just done it. And so, good example now, there's patient experience.
Yeah, patient experience officer.
So when somebody's asking or wants to have a position like that, and you're asked, go find somebody that's done that,
Yeah.
they haven't.
That's right.
So for the person hunting or the person seeking to hire that person, how do you connect up with a search firm and tell them, because many times they're trying to explain.
Yeah. Well, if you're a talent company, everything we do is we put all our job postings out there. So you can find that. And you can look and see what the client said. And you're exactly right. For example, you're not in healthcare. Are you going to apply for a job as a patient experience officer? I don't know. It depends on what you did. But, you know, we had J.C. hired a guy out of Apple to and he didn't make it, right? He screwed up pennies. Now, they were screwed up to start with, but he made it worse, okay? So that's what the kind of thing. So if you go back to the same thing. If they've done it before in a smaller setting, they can probably do it again. If you've been a patient experience officer in a 100-bed hospital, you probably can jump the crowd and go to a 500-bed hospital. But most of you, if you're a CFO in a 100-bed hospital, you can go to a 200-bed hospital, okay? Yes?
Going back to the previous slide, the second point that says recruiter platform.
Yeah.
Your version of dashboard that you see in LinkedIn does it give more information that people like us don't see?
On LinkedIn? No, LinkedIn.
More to get content, right? As a recruiter.
Yeah, you better get in contact. Then you get a full. The last candidate client profile I saw was 8 pages long, single spaced. They're not going to put that out there. They put out a blurb. It's called a request for referral on RFR, and it's just a short synopsis. Let
me rephrase it.
All right.
Whatever I'm putting on my LinkedIn profile, I know what it is because I put
Yeah.
it in. But you as a recruiter, do you get information about what I visited, what I did, and other stuff?
No, not that I know of. Okay. Yes.
I think a mistake that is being made in the hiring process is that we always look at the candidate's skills
Yeah,
and compare that with what they are going to do.
yeah,
in
absolutely.
a
That is.
specific position. I've had to let a lot of people go because although they met all of this testing,
Yeah.
once they were on the job, I had to let them go for the way that how they were doing it.
Absolutely. And I think you just proved my point.
And so
That you,
what are you doing to support that, to check on that cultural fit that is needed?
okay, that's a very good point. That is more art than it is science. Because what happens is we have really good diagnosis tools on candidates. As an example, in our firm we use something called the DISC. I mean, it's a really good, quick and dirty, you know, this is what this person looks like, okay? I have clients that will not hire anybody unless they have a perfect predictive index, which is another one, okay, that they use all the time. They are wedded to that, okay? So that's the first thing. They know for each position what kind of profile that they want to have. What we do not have tools on, and I could give you the Hartman, I could give you all these things that would tell me about you. What we don't have are good tools to diagnose the organization. We just don't have good tools. And we have management psychology group we work with. They're here in Atlanta. And I call them up all the time. Is there anything out there that can tell me the type of person's going to fit into this organization as far as this job is concerned? And they say no. Say there's nothing there. And if they are telling you that, then they're lying to you. In other words, you know, some groups will say, yes, we got the tool for doing that. So what has to happen is it's an art form, and you got to have a lot of experience to get that. So at my age, I'm pretty darn good at making a match. And other search guys that are, you know, in that 55, 65-year-old, they've been in it 30 years, they're going to be good at it. The new neophyte right out of the box is going to have to be really, really careful to make sure. And don't forget now, you got the judgment of the search consultant, but you got this whole interview process, okay? So I would not only look at the search consultant I was using, I'd look at my interview process. What am I doing as an organization? Why are we hiring somebody that doesn't make it? And I don't think that's the fault of the search guy, okay? That's
If at all the cultural fit is established really in the interview process.
absolutely, no question about it. The search guy or gal makes a judgment call, but it's based on a limited amount of information because they do not work in the organization on a day-to-day basis. So when it comes to the interviews, you know, you got at least 2 interviews that you're going to have, sometimes 3, and you ought to be able to figure that out during that time if you're getting a group to interview and all the things that you can do to make sure. And by the way, if I were doing the hiring, I'd be checking references in addition to the ones that the search firm did. Okay? Yeah. I'm sorry, they keep asking these questions. All right. Yes, Michelle.
With all the crises that have been going on in the healthcare arena regarding infection and readmittance, there was an article in the paper yesterday about the readmittance rate.
Yeah.
In your searches, do you look for people who are highly qualified in crisis management and that type of stuff?
And the answer is, it's not one of the main criteria, okay? And again, mostly what I do is CEO work or have done. And so I can give you the top 12 things that we look for in CEOs, and it's from every search. They all come out the same. And you know what? The number one thing that we look for in CEOs goes back and forth. There's 2 things, and they're either 1 or 2 or 1 and 2. Anybody want to guess what they are for a CEO now? Oh, that's third, maybe 4th. Physician relations, okay? Number 1 thing is either trustworthiness or strategic vision. Those are the 2 things that are always there. And I don't have to, I mean, I have to go in, I have to interview all these people, and then I know what the answers are going to be. I know what these things are going to be, but I have to do it with every group instead of going in there and telling them what it's going to be, because they have to feel like they came up with the answers, not the search guy telling them what it ought to be, okay? So I have run out of time, so I'm going to jump through this. You're part of the problem. You kept making me go back. All right. You got to develop multiple contacts within the search firm. It's not enough to know Larry Tyler. You need to know a lot of people in there, especially the research associates, okay? They're the ones that do that first line of screening. Develop contacts with multiple search firms. You can't rely on Tyler and Company. You have to have 6, 8, 10 firms that you have contacts with. Think positive and be positive. You get eliminated for interviewing poorly. If you did a poor interview, boy, it's hard to recover from that. Not a match between the personality and the organization. That's usually why you didn't get hired. Compensation. We have a candidate now that's got an offer. It's been over a week. We knew it was going to be tough. The client, we beat on him. We got him there. He went in there. They made him an offer at 20% more than what he was making, and he still hadn't taken the job yet. Okay? Location issues. Sometimes you go into a place. I was talking to a candidate. Last night I was talking to the president of GAHE, and he was talking about going on an interview. Came back to the room. His wife had been out looking at houses. Came back. She was bawling. You know, I can't live here. That was what she was saying. So that's oftentimes comes up. Lack of match between the needs, lack of enthusiasm. Hey, these two go together. Lack of enthusiasm and overzealousness. Okay? All right, you go in there. They don't know that you want to leave them with the idea you want the job. Okay? You can't turn down a job that you haven't been offered. Well, I guess you can drop out. And then the other thing, if you're overzealous, you want the job too much. They think there's something wrong there. Okay? So you got to be careful. And references, they need to be enthusiastic references. References damn with faint praise. Did you know that? Damn with faint praise. So the references you choose should be people that just love you. They think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they don't mind telling everybody they talk to about how good you are. And then be flexible on the interview and talk with your spouse. Never go to an interview.
My question is, if I'm a reference, somebody calls me.
Yes.
What is it that, where can the candidate improve? What is the weakest point?
Okay. Yes. Okay. I would address it honestly. Okay. That'd be one thing, because we're not looking for perfect ones. Now, what I tell candidates when they ask you that, they're asking you, what can you do better, or what, how do you fail, things like that. There are several ways to answer that. It's a trap if you're not careful. So, okay, first way to answer that question is, they say, what are your weaknesses? Say, well, I work too hard. I mean, people tap me on the shoulder and tell me to go home. All right? So that is the most common answer. Don't use that. But, use something that's actually a strength in disguise. Second thing is, go back and talk about something that you didn't do well, that you have been managed to improve on, or at least get it up to an acceptable level. And that's what I do. I said, when I first got up before a group, I stuttered and I said, and all this other thing. I ended up going to Toastmasters. It just changed my life. Now, I oftentimes at ACHE, I'm always in the top 10 speakers. Most of the time, I'm number 1. Okay? You see what I'm saying here? You start with something, you improved upon it. The third thing you can do is that you can always use humor. And one lady one time told me, she said, Ms. Tyler, I have to be honest with you, I have a weakness for chocolate. So, all right. Yes?
I want to talk about age for a second.
Age, okay.
In an interview with a private equity company out of Chicago, the recruiter called me the week before. I spoke with the two equity partners. The recruiter interviewed me for an hour.
Yeah.
Then set up a telephone call with
Yeah.
the two capital, the owners of the company, and that only lasted 35 minutes. And at about minute 20, I was flat out asked how old you are.
That was illegal.
It's not.
Well, it is. It's not.
You can ask the question, how old are you? It's not illegal. What is illegal is that you take that information and hold it against the candidate.
Okay. All right. I agree with that. Okay.
So I said, I'm 60.
Yeah.
And from there on, it was noticeably that the discussion, the level of questions just turned to very low. Just give us a couple of more minutes, and after 35 minutes, they concluded the interview.
Okay.
Promised me to give me some information beforehand or after the call. How it went from their perspective, never heard.
Well, the recruiter should have known what your age was, and gone on and prepared the client for that. And I'll give you an example.
But age is important in the hiring process. Nobody can deny this.
Yes, I can. I can tell you it is a consideration. I will not tell you that it is the be-all to end-all. Ninfa Saunders in Macon was 62 years old. It didn't even come up. The only thing that came up was Ninfa brought it up herself and said, when I leave here, I'm going to have my successor in place so you don't ever have to pay Larry Tyler another fee. They like that idea, you know. All right, so now if you go to Europe, it's a different deal. I mean, I've seen the specs on some of those assignments. They say we want somebody that's less than 55 years old. In the United States,
Male or female?
male or female? Yeah. All right. Have I run out of time?
You have, but
All right.
Close down.
All right, okay. Let me see what happens here. I've got, don't math, we talked about that, provide old references, don't play games with Search Guy. And then know yourself, take as many test instruments as you can, okay? And because, you know, sometimes you end up in an organization and they've taken the same test instruments, the same person you're talking to may do that, okay? And so may have taken an instrument. You got a whole lot of conversation there. How to stand out, be prepared, ask insightful questions, look like an executive, okay? Don't go in there. I had a candidate right here in town, great candidate, and you know, he was in the healthcare field, but he had been in the IT side of it. So he came in, he had no tie on, he had long hair, and he would fit with my client. He would not fit in a hospital. It just never would have worked. Be enthusiastic and ask for the job. Okay, great. I got through it, Doug. All right. No, I'm going to sit down. I will stay around a little bit of time afterwards if somebody wants to come up and ask questions. Thank you. You've been a great audience and very interactive.